Hey guys, Bugcat7 here. Okay, it is Thursday, September 24th, 2020, and I want to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. All right, guys, well, I want to cover this article from the New England Historical Society, who I subscribe to. I get their newsletters, and it's about the Indian trails that were here when the settlers got here, and the colonists and settlers got here and that were immediately put to good use by the settlers and colonists when they got here, and ended up as being some major interstate highways and also interstate highways and roads. And people may actually live in areas where some of the roads are actually named after these Indian trails. A perfect example is up here in Springfield, Vermont, where Jimmy lives over here, and you can see right here this Skitchawag Trail. Right here is this Route 143 here that runs through Vermont here, where Jimmy lives, and it's an Indian trail. This is an Indian trail. Okay, the Skitchawag Trail, and it goes quite far. It goes all the way up here. Okay, so many of these roads and interesting, and I've mentioned it many times in my videos about this, and how it's connected to the Hopewell tradition, which is this trading exchange system that they know about. Okay, the Hopewell interaction sphere. Okay, but what we do know is that the um, archaeologists and anthropologists in Indiana from university there in the University of Indiana, um, we're looking at these things just recently in some recent archaeology done there, and whereas before they thought that the Adena were the predecessor of the Hopewell people, well, now they seem to think that they were living, together in the same culture, but the Adena people being separate and apart in different body types and a different people than the Hopewell themselves. So they say they're discovering that they were contemporaries. Whereas in this Wikipedia article here, you see when they talk about the Hopewell tradition, they'll say that they inherited from their Adena forebears an incipient social stratification, and talking about this system that they inherited, just like many Native American tribes, such as the Iroquois, probably inherited their structure from a much older society. Okay, so you can read more about this in this article. We've already discussed the Hopewell exchange system, and we've also read in these accounts, of these structures, these earthen structures found in Ohio. I know a lot of people had some issues with this assessment that I gave of these things. Everybody wants to believe they have some sort of astronomical significance. Goes their train. So apparently, the positions where these earthen structures, the way that they're positioned relative to the cardinal points, obviously shows they're all in different positions. They're not following any sort of, identical coordinates. So it's probably not astronomical alignment. And as far as spiritual use or ceremonial use, they're so gigantic. It's similar to that. I mean, look at the Meadowlands. Here's the Meadowlands in New Jersey. Okay, see any sort of familiar features here? Okay, so look, what they often find, I've reported this through either scientific reporting, from archaeologists, and some of these accounts from the past, that these major Indian trails were often found, major ones, not just the simple trails, but major ones were found near these earthworks. Okay, so the there doesn't seem to be any sort of circumstantial evidence to back up any notion that these things have astronomical alignments or any sort of ceremonial, spiritual. There seems to be none of that, but there seems to be a lot more that suggests that the scale and level, especially that the network of highways that this represents, okay, seems on a scale far larger than anybody can imagine, more like an industrial scale. I've reported to you on this channel from mainstream that the Hopewell evidently receiving the raw materials and then manufacturing these things into certain kinds of crafts and goods that they could make. So this is what they're saying, okay? And the thing about this with um, the Hopewell tradition is say that the Adena were the forebears. Well, they were not. So these people seem to be existing in simultaneously, okay, in a shared culture, shared tradition, similar to that I've shown on this channel, to the relationship that the Watusi tribes have with their people, okay, whereas the aristocracy of the tribe is the 7-footer people and taller, where all their subjects are a different people who are all average size. Okay, the chiefs of the Fiji Islands, again, their aristocracy only marries within their class. Okay, we find these dynamics occurring today. Okay, on some sort of similar tradition to these peoples. Okay, so what was going on in the past? Okay, so if the Indiana archaeologists and anthropologists are correct, then it's not only the Hopewell tradition, it's the Adena and the Hopewell tradition. Okay, and here's what some of these Adena people look like. Okay, obviously he's an average sized person. They were slightly more robust. Well, I think that's an understatement, and this is the type of language that they use, such as the Humboldt Museum with the Lovelock people, to minimize it, to make it seem less than it really is, okay? Because they don't want to go down that road. It interferes with the concept of Darwinianism and evolution. You're not supposed to be getting smaller from bigger. It's supposed to be going bigger all the time. You know, we've stopped growing. I've covered the history of height on this channel. So, look, we were looking at these earthworks, okay, which don't seem to be in alignment with anything, and they're probably not. And I really do feel sorry for the people who are stuck on the History Channel propaganda and the mainstreams. No, so they're revising everything they knew about it. And they even admitted themselves that they didn't know a lot about these peoples at all. Okay, they're only starting to discover some of the things about these people now. Okay, so people who say they know differently or whatever it is, well, it's quite clear that these things are all in different positions relative to cardinal points. It has nothing to do with that. They just so happen to be next to major Indian trails, and the level of this trading, it was on an industrial scale, and people were manufacturing goods from raw materials. These obviously areas slated for these types of purposes and usages, and there's more evidence to suggest my side of the argument, at least for the utilitarian use of these areas, than there is for any sort of astronomical alignments or spiritual or ceremonial purposes at all. It's complete fiction. I don't care what they say on History Channel, in your textbooks, or any of these cockamamie authors that'll appear on Coast to Coast, like L.A. Marzulli, and the propaganda against the giants, whether it's in the Bible or anywhere else, is a simple demonization of the enemy. All these giant people seem very sophisticated, very advanced in their culture, and probably passed on the most the most advanced culture socially to the Iroquois, where all the stone walls just happen to be in this giant mega city, the biggest stone construction, the biggest area of man-made stone constructions in the entire world, here in northeastern North America. Okay, so I'm sorry. I feel sorry for people who are stuck in the brainwashing and psyop and misinformation going on in history on the government approved History Channel. Okay, but I feel sorry for you that you get sucked into all this nonsense. When it's clear. Just with common sense, you can figure these things out. So, in any case, like I've said, I've mentioned this many times on my channel. The accounts themselves and the accounts by archaeologists with these major networks of highways and Indian trails near these earthworks throughout the United States, even down by the Stone Fort in Kentucky and the one in Georgia, which all seem very similar in their intrinsic designs, but different in the way that they appear. Often, like this, for example, okay, has it's there's structural designs here. It's on bluffs. There's security. When they looked at these things, they originally thought they were fortifications. Then, by looking at the details of the way that the flow of people in and out of these places sort of suggested that, but then they revised it down because it only seemed like a medium security. It didn't seem like a maximum security for fortification in the way it was designed. So they started to having to rethink these things. Okay, and I'm simply saying that these are the trading areas. The medium security, it had to be. Okay, these people are more sophisticated than we think. You got to get this sort of stupid romanticized idea about these peoples from the past and how advanced they were. They weren't running around in animal skins after all. They had textiles. Where'd that come from? They haven't even explored these ideas yet. Okay? They're just starting to find these things out now. They're just starting to come to these realizations now. And new, fresh eyes look at some of these things, I guess. Okay? Although it's nobody's crowing about it, but these are the things that they're finding out. Okay, so don't tell me you don't have any biases that you learn through mass media and the History Channel and your books. And, even Charles C. Mann was saying in his book how he looked at some of what the textbook were teaching his kids about native peoples in the Americas here, and it seemed ridiculous to him. It seemed like babyish. I've even shown you on this channel where I've taken to university websites where they provide learning material for these things to supply for public education, and even at the high school level, the whole thing seems to aimed at like babies. It's so scaled down. So anyway, let me get to this article for you because you're going to find it interesting, and being that there's no proof or even circumstantial evidence to suggest that these earthworks were astronomically aligned or for spiritual or ceremonial purposes, it seems like there's more in the argument in favor of what I'm trying to say these areas are, and it seems very simple. But let's see what they say in this article from New England Historical Society. And I think you'll be fascinated by how many times trade is mentioned in this, but we'll look at it anyway, okay? And if it's true what they say in this first line here, the Indian trails that crisscross New England go back to prehistoric times. Well, that's before the Adena and all that. That's from the woodland period, okay? Prehistoric times is in the Paleolithic times. Okay, so what was going on? What does it suggest? And oh, by the way, um, here is important trails here that I want to see. Importance to Michigan. Okay, you can see these trails here. This one goes all the way to the East Coast through Massachusetts here, through Pequot and Iroquois territory up here, and all these trading routes. Okay, these Indian trails. Okay, going all the way down south here. Okay, at least the ones that they can discern. Okay, something major was going on. Like, for instance, these areas at the Paint Creek works here in Ross County, Ohio. Okay, these were in relatively close range to each other. Okay, why would we be traveling on major roads to go over here when you have the identical thing over here? What's the purpose of that? Why should there be these major thoroughfares and everything connecting everything together? Okay, just stay here. You don't have to go here. Obviously other things were going on, things that had more to do with the Hopewell tradition and exchange system that was on a scale that we can possibly imagine. They're saying these are the Indian trails that are important to Michigan. It just so happens to be where all this copper went, this 500 million pounds of copper that went somewhere that they don't know where it went. Okay, well, maybe this is where it went. And these, um, when you see these artificial harbors that John Jensen points out here on Long Island, et cetera, et cetera. What do you need artificial harbors for Indian canoes that are 1,000 foot, 1,900 foot long? And, what do you need that for? What kind of boats are you receiving? What kind of ships are you receiving over here? And it's just so interesting that a lot of these Indian trails have stone walls built along them, and also along the waterways here. And here's me in northern Connecticut and rural Connecticut at a stone wall site, a remote stone wall site. And this is like a 5 to 6 foot wall built with giant sized boulders, and God only knows what it took to put them there. Okay, and I'm hanging out there. Okay, I'm not just a guy who sits behind a computer here. This is me out in the wilderness. Okay, and I'm here at the Stonewall site in Mallory. Okay, so look, I've been there, done that. So let's read this article here. 6 Indian trails that turned into scenic highways and byways. The Indian trails that crisscross New England go back to prehistoric times. Native Americans migrated from summer to winter homes along the paths, often worn bare by centuries of travel. They used the trails for hunting, trading, and making war. When the English colonists arrived, they owed a debt of gratitude for the Indian trails, wrote Chester B. Price in his book, Historic Indian Trails of New Hampshire. Thanks to the Indians, the early New Englanders inherited a vast network of trails which not only covered the New England states but extended as far west as the Rocky Mountains, Price wrote. The Mohawk Trail and the Kennebec Trail were two of the most famous Indian trails in New England. During the American Revolution, they were used for military maneuvers. Benedict Arnold followed both the Kennebec Trail to his regret and the Mohawk Trail to his satisfaction. He captured Fort Ticonderoga at the end of it. We identified 6 scenic driving routes that follow old Indian trails, at least one in each state. Some have been researched more thoroughly than others. If you know of scenic old Indian trails that can be driven today, please share them in the comments section. Okay, I can share one with you right now. Skitchawag Trail in Vermont here, Route 143. There you go. Old Connecticut Path. The Old Connecticut Path was one of the most important Indian trails stretching from Massachusetts Bay to the Connecticut River. In the early 1630s, Nipmuc Indians loaded their surplus corn onto birch bark backpacks and walked from the Connecticut River to Massachusetts Bay. There they traded their corn for copper and iron goods and woolen cloth. John Oldham, whose death started the Pequot War, followed the Old Connecticut Path to explore the continent's interior in 1633. In 1636, the Reverend Thomas Hooker spent 2 weeks on the Old Connecticut Path with his followers to Hartford. The Reverend John Wareham also led his congregation along the Old Connecticut Path to Windsor, Connecticut. John Adams followed that route from Toland to Windsor in 1771. Today I rode through paradise, Adams wrote. There is no consensus the exact location of the Old Connecticut Path from beginning to end, though genealogical researchers are working on it. They concluded Adams took part of the path that goes from the Tolland Green Historic District through the towns of Ellington, East Windsor, and South Windsor. Then he went to the Palisado Green in Windsor. Generally, the Old Connecticut Path went through Massachusetts, heading west along the Charles River in Cambridge, curved south in Wayland through Framingham to Webster and to Lake Chawbaughnuggamog. In Connecticut, that's a mouthful. In Connecticut, it continued to Hartford, Wethersfield, and Windsor. Okay, so they're talking about this trail in Connecticut, which is pretty much where I was, sort of there by the Housatonic River there in Mallory, and all the fantastic things that you can see there. Just, I'm hanging out by this stone wall. It's just fantastic. Just unbelievable. This is early spring, and the wall and the constructions along this brook are just amazing and weird and very strange, different kind of things going on here. I did all this research up there. If you haven't seen those videos, please watch them. So in case, let's go on with this over here. So, Connecticut there, and it's just what they're neglecting to say that some of these reverends in their flocks there were busy killing off a lot of the hostile Indians. And I read about that from actual reference library resources here. That's the books you can't take out of the library here on Long Island, where a number of these religious people in their flocks were getting rid of the hostile Indians. Unfortunately, by the time Jefferson came up here, because he was interested in the native peoples, he wanted to record their languages. In some instances on Long Island here, he could only few members of the tribe surviving, and that was in the 1700s. Okay, they had eliminated many of these people. Waldoboro Mast Trail. Maine's Indians used a vast network of canoe trails to get around, and to reach them, they used a series of Indian trails from the interior to the coast. Carrying places or portages gave Maine tribes mobility throughout the region. It also let them trade extensively with each other and later with Europeans. And remember, they say that these trails go back to prehistoric times. This is what the Native Americans were using it for in more recent times, not in these thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. Okay, but listen to what they're using it for. Okay, Indian paths from inland Maine to the coast all gave the Native Americans access to fur, birch bark, and moose hide. One such path is known as the Waldoboro Mast Trail, which now follows Route 220 from Montville to Waldoboro. It was the most direct route from Lake St. George to the shellfish beds of the seacoast. Warnock Indian families migrated along the path from the seasonal hunting camp to the seasonal fishing camp. They hunted for moose and beaver in the winter and brought their fur as trade goods to the coast using snowshoes, sledges, and toboggans. English settlers found the trail a convenient route to carry masts and spars for hundreds of the king's ships built in Waldoboro. Today, Route 220 winds through rural Maine from Montville. Okay, so another one of these things is used to move all of these goods, through these areas, and we're talking about in large amounts. Okay, so these are what these trading areas. You have to provide secure areas for people to come and go with all of these goods. Okay, it's just don't think these people were so. This is the bias you have in your mind from what you learned, the stupid, crummy education you got in school, and what you've seen on TV, and how these people acted and everything. They're wearing deerskins, and they weren't wearing deerskins. They were wearing these textiles and cloths with pyramids and wedge hooks, all these kind of things on it that you could just imagine in your wildest imagination. You couldn't imagine what they are. Mohawk Trail. The Mohawk Trail, one of the most famous Indian trails today, is one of the most beautiful drives in Massachusetts. Originally a trade route, it connected the Atlantic Indian tribes with the Iroquois tribes in upstate New York and Canada. And I often talk about this along the stone walls of New York and New England, about how they were using the walls, these areas, for these goods to be either placed there or held there or supplied in the many, many areas. It's a gigantic mega city that you would not believe. That's what the stone walls represent, folks. Okay, the largest stone construction in the whole entire world, man-made, the largest area of man-made stone constructions ever, and with plenty of exciting things. They're more exciting than even the stone circles down here in Africa, which is a lot, but not quite as much as there is in the North America. Period. End of story. The trail became a warpath when Mohawk war parties traveled it to destroy Pocumtuck settlements. Metacomet, or King Philip, took the Mohawk Trail in 1676 to try to enlist the Mohawks in his cause. He failed. Benedict Arnold then took the Mohawk Trail on his way to capture Fort Ticonderoga. In 1914, the Massachusetts General Court declared the 63-mile Mohawk Trail a scenic tourist route, the first in the United States. So, another one of these trails are being used for trade and trade and trade and trade, even much later periods of time in historical times that were recorded. Okay, but what were they being used for thousands and thousands of years ago when you're dealing with these earthworks and constructions? Yes, some of them were for ceremonial purposes, some of them were for astronomical purposes, but some of the structures that were built were just for practical purposes, utilitarian purposes, and that's how it is in the world. Just why is it got to be one thing or the other? It can't be both or either, or it just, these possibilities get closed off when you listen to all the propaganda and nonsense that you hear on the History Channel, mainstream textbooks, and all these kooky authors that write up all kinds of fantastic stories, including the giants being cannibals and all this kind of other stuff, which is nonsense. The Winnicott Trail ran along the coast from the Merrimack River in Massachusetts through Winnicott, now Hampton, and along the seashore to the Piscataqua River at Strawberry Bank, now Portsmouth. Okay, so you see how these names have changed in the past. That's when they refer to things. You had, large skeletal remains were dug up here, and then they say, well, there's no such town in this state or this place, and people start crowing about how you're a liar and all this kind of stuff. And meanwhile, the town has changed names like 10 times, and they don't know what they're talking about. Okay, it just happens to be one of those names, but they don't know it because they're living in, goofball wherever. The Pennacook and Abenaki Indians migrated along the path in the summer to what is now Odiorn Point. It's a wooded park along the shoreline with sweeping views of the Atlantic Ocean and the town of Newcastle. When the English colonists arrived in 1635, they used the Winnicott Trail as a bridle path. Today, it is scenic Route 1A, also known as Ocean Boulevard, running along New Hampshire's 18-mile shoreline. Okay, so another important one. Okay, Pequot Path. For hundreds of years, Narragansett and Pequot Indians traveled along the Pequot Path. It ran about 69 miles near the mainland shore from Providence to New London, Connecticut. In 1636, Roger Williams took the Pequot Path through the Apponaug, Warwick, on his journey from the Providence to the trading post at the Cockumscussock near Wickford. It is admirable to see what paths their naked, hardened feet have made in the wilderness in the most stony and rocky places, he wrote. Williams probably saw a dozen Narragansett villages along 20 miles of the path. English settlers began using the Pequot Path until it evolved into the lower part of Boston Post Road. Today, parts of scenic Route 1A, not to be confused with U.S. Route 1A, follow the old Pequot Path along the south coast. Okay. Route 22A. Route 22A through the Lake Champlain Valley in Vermont was once part of a network of well-worn Indian trails linking villages and other overland trail networks. The western Abenakis of Vermont also used waterways such as the Connecticut River and Lake Champlain and Memphremagog. The St. Francis Indians came down from Canada along the trail by Lake Champlain to find warmer fishing grounds. The trail finally stretched to the Bronx, New York, where it became known as the Road to Bedford and Vermont. Today, Vermont Route 22A is a continuation of New York Route 22A and a scenic drive and foliage season. Route 22A goes from Ferrisburgh to historic Virgins, Vermont's oldest city. It then runs through Addison, Bridgeport, Shoreham, Orwell, and Fairhaven on the New York border. Along the way lie the Chimney Point State Historic Site, dairy farms, rolling hills, white church steeples, and country inns. Nothing Native American there. But here's the book, New England's Hidden Past, and we're hearing these stories about it, but just to illustrate how complex and how intense these Indian trails, quote unquote trails, were more like highways and byways. And again, we see from these how importance of these Indian trails stretching all along these areas, especially along the waterways. It seems to me that these goods were leaving. Okay, that 500 million pounds of copper were leaving to go somewhere else. And I've gone over this on my channel, on the videos on my channel. Okay, with John Jensen's work in ancient canal builders. All right, and if you haven't seen that video, okay, these artificial harbors that are have to be at least 7,000 years old by judging by the level of water that's there. The last time these things could have been used as artificial harbors was some 7,000 years ago. Okay, so what did Native American peoples need with major harbors like this one right here? Okay, this one is 2 miles offshore off the coast of Florida, but they find many of them around Long Island here. Okay, maybe what's not being shown with these the other trails, these are incomplete themselves. Okay, and if it's going back to prehistoric times, it predates the Adena. It happens to be when these large hominids or giant humanoids were running around. Okay, and that the this is really misinformation here. Going by current standards of archaeology, have now found that the Hopewell and Adeni were contemporaries, living in the same society with the same culture. Okay, these giant peoples, these large hominids, weird humanoids with vaulted craniums, the largest in the world. Okay, and here happens to be one of them in Indiana. Speak of Indiana, with a copper helmet, giant skull with the copper armor found there. Okay, who was this guy and where was he from? Who knows? Okay, but I've gone over this in my accounts of the Giants on his channel. Okay, so you have to think about all these things. Are these areas really for spiritual and ceremonial purposes, for astronomical lines? I highly doubt it. Okay, being in so much proximity to waterways, which we just heard from these things, that the waterways were the highways along with these trails in order to get all of these goods and different things around. It seems more likely that these areas were the trading areas, and that they were considered forts, but then revised not to be forts because the security level wasn't that high. Okay, again, if you're a member of the society, you're on the honor system. Okay, you have to abide by the laws of the society, whatever. Everything was well organized. These people were more socially advanced than we could possibly know, not running around in deerskins like we're all led to believe. Okay, these are the things we have to reconsider. I'm sorry that you don't like those things and you'd like to believe all these fantastic stories about it, but these were not what these things were used for. Okay, and this just bears it out. Okay, what these trails and major highways were being used for, even by the native peoples in later times. Okay, that they inherited from their forebears, the Adena. Okay. All right, guys. So anyway, I thought you might be interested in hearing about these things because this is all over the whole North America and the Americas in general. Okay, just like up there in Springfield, Vermont, with the Skitchawag Trail here, these things have been incorporated and are now major roads and highways because they were major roads and highways thousands and thousands of years ago. Okay, guys, you just have to consider these things, and if these things were built for utilitarian purposes and nothing more, there was no spiritual stuff going on there, no astronomical alignments, no nothing, okay, except that they were trading in these areas and doing the practical everyday things that they did with this intense tradition that they had here, obviously, that anthropologists and archaeologists know all about, okay? And if you think about it hard enough, you have to understand that they had to be highly organized and it also had to be secure. And this is one way of controlling the people there. Okay. The design of these things suggests this. Okay. That's all I'm saying. All right. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Please hit the like button. And if you're not subscribed, please do subscribe. And we'll be getting back into the Giants International real soon. All right, guys. Anyway, Bugcat 7 signing out. Peace.